Loading.
Okay.
Where's Carol today?
Yeah.
She never misses.
No,
I hope her daughter's okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, There you go.
Oh, no.
Here, I'll just scroll away so you can't
could
see.
turn it- You can tilt a little to the northeast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may think where I'm sitting and change it.
Oh, Anita, you're cheating.
All right.
Now nobody's on there.
All
Okay.
right.
Thank you, Greta.
You're
So,
still there, you just can't see it.
welcome everyone. And we'll, glad you're here today, and we'll start with the prayer of the day. Oh God,
You resist those who are proud and give grace to those who are humble. Give us the humility of your Son, that we may embody the generosity of Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
so. Someone want to read the 2 verses from Proverbs?
That's pretty long.
Yeah.
So hard.
I'll read it. Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great, for it is better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble.
Makes a lot more sense with the gospel reading when we get there.
Yeah. Very, yeah. It's basically what Jesus says in the gospel. And it is, humility is, not something we as, and I would say it's part of being human too, is that we're not very good at humility. Everything about competing and it's, we're told about the importance of believing in yourself and putting yourself forward, and I know that there are those who would say, if you're in any kind of public office or in any field that is, whether it's acting, or you want to be noticed, you want to be known, you want to have your name out there, and that you want to put yourself forward, and the difference being that in the time Proverbs was written, putting yourself, it was being recognized by the king that would give you status in the public eye. Today, though, it is, it's, if you've got a presence on social media or it used to be in the paper more than anything, but now it's like, how many million views do you have on TikTok or Facebook or all of that? It's that's in some respects how we are, our worth or our values is connected to that.
Well, I read some of the commentaries about Proverbs.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that were mentioned is the book of Proverbs is a manual of instruction for wise living. It reminds us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. True humility is evidence of wisdom. Proverbs draws attention to the ordinary moments that reveal our character. Our character is revealed in our everyday experiences. How we treat people in traffic, or in the line of the grocery store reveals something about how we view others and how we view God.
You had to bring up traffic. didn't you?
Yeah.
How was your commute ending today? You don't have far to go.
No.
But he was late.
Wow.
Traffic was like noontime. I don't know what-
It was terrible, yeah.
I didn't have traffic, and we come from the same area.
Getting onto 90th Street.
Oh, that was bad. I had to turn right and then,
Yeah.
okay, I forgot about that.
And then somebody was sitting at the corner, you know, the car in front of me, and I wanted to turn right, come to church. But somebody's sitting at the corner to let everybody go, and, you know, not proceeding so that the people could turn right. And, you know, and then you just had to bring that up.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah, no,
You're a candidate for a self-driving vehicle,
Yes, I am,
but you wouldn't trust it.
I'm a candidate for needing the Lord more in my life. So I don't wanna take out that person who is causing all the problems, so. He probably thought he was being a very nice person.
I'd love to hear what you were saying.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
Where are you guys at?
We just finished the long Proverbs reading.
Mhm.
Yeah, thinking about like tables and how they are arranged and who sits where and why there's places of honor and places of less honor, I guess. But yeah, how do we have a more inclusive table where everybody can be at a place of honor? And
There's an expression, there's always room for one more at a round table.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Well, so many companies have gone, I mean, this is a boardroom table where the boss sits at the top and everybody else is. And if you're.
Boss is a
if
computer
you're-
today.
If you're the good guy, you sit closer, you know, and, but, you know, that's why so many companies have gone to round tables so that, you know, everybody feels like they're just as important as the next person. So.
yeah.
Well, if the front pews are the pews of honor, the Lutherans are good about not.
Well,
Well, no, I would say that the back pews are the place of honor in the Lutheran
Yeah.
churches.
Now nobody wants to be on TV, so.
Yeah, I know, and it pointed right at me. Hallelujah. Happy are they who fear the Lord and have great delight in God's commandments. Their descendants will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches will be in their house, and their righteousness will last forever. Light shines in the darkness for the upright. The righteous are merciful and full of compassion. It is good for them to be generous in lending and to manage their affairs with justice. For they will never be shaken. The righteous will be kept in everlasting remembrance. They will not be afraid of any evil rumors. Their hearts will be steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Their heart is established and will not shrink until they see their desire upon their enemies. They have given freely to the poor, and their righteousness stands forever, fast forever. They will hold up their head with honor. The wicked shall see it and be angry. They will gnash their teeth and pine away. The desires of the wicked will perish.
This is one of those Psalms, again, it's just easier to read it when it comes out of your Bible, when you see each stanza that is layered on top of the next, and how each, you know, and as Dean reads it, the emphasis is on that third person, they, their, they, the wicked, happy are those, and the psalmist is really making a emphatic point about pointing out the third person, I think, and the question is why.
You know, I was taken back by the one, their heart is established and will not shrink until they see their desire upon their enemies. It's almost like I'm enforcing my will upon you, which doesn't seem to be a Christian thing to me.
Christian thing.
Yeah.
That's what Barb would bring that comment up.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
But to them, but to the psalmist, yeah, you're right. It's not a Christian thing, but that would be good news to put down the enemy. But the enemy to the Hebrews was the political enemy, was the geographical enemy, whereas they were the chosen ones, they were the righteous, and of course Jesus changes all that thinking. But here we have a distinction between the faithful and those who aren't.
the wicked and the angry and the gnashing their teeth.
Yeah.
And that seemed to not belong in there. You should just take it away.
Take it away.
Verse 10.
Verse 10. You know, Glenn and I had to go to a synod meeting on Monday about, we're forced to, we have to take boundaries classes and what are appropriate boundaries, and one of the first ways they opened up was to establish what is the difference, the distinction between a boundary, what was it, a boundary violation and a boundary,
What's the difference between crossing a boundary?
crossing a boundary
And violating a
and
boundary?
violating a boundary, and we just sat there and we're like, okay, this is too early, I need another cup of coffee. You know, but, you know, preaching the gospel, the thing that came to my mind was preaching the gospel is a boundary. You're crossing a boundary because the gospel is so, it's Jesus turned the world upside down, right? And so the gospel really addresses a lot of the things in our own culture that are antithetical to Christ. Greed, power, human power, things like that. So this last line, the wicked see it and are angry and gnash their teeth. You know, maybe they're hearing the good news of God, and that's offensive to them somehow because that takes power away from them. That God is the one with the power, not Nebuchadnezzar.
Is it pushing a boundary? Violating a boundary means the person takes offense.
Yeah.
But if you're pushing a boundary, I mean, crossing a boundary, I would think it's pushing the boundary. So
Yeah.
I believe this, and I push, and now I believe. And you learn, and as you become educated, you push yourself, or you push that barrier to improve. You're not crossing it. You're just
Right.
increasing.
You're challenging.
You're challenging it. You're pushing it.
Mhm.
You're not necessarily crossing it.
Violating. Yeah.
Well, because crossing it means you've gone over, but to me, if you're pushing boundaries,
You're stretching it.
you're improving. And
But-
whether I'm pushing your boundary, I'm increasing or improving you.
But it depends on how he sees it, though, I suppose.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because he probably was offended when I walked in and didn't want to sit next to Typhoid
Oh.
Mary, and I violated, I didn't want to violate that boundary.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, I guess, you know, to Agnita's point, the wicked see it. How others see this good news is their problem.
Yeah, that's how
Now,
it's.
what is the desire of the wicked?
Mm.
What do they desire? They don't like,
Well,
but the
I think
righteous.
in this case, the wicked are seen as those who oppose Israel and the establishment of the nation of Israel. Those who would oppose that they are seen and fight against that.
Or we try to take advantage of them.
Right.
You know, the other way to look at it is like with Kubler-Ross and the stages of dying. It could be that as Christians, we're going to push somebody's boundary. We're going to challenge them in their thinking. And so there's denial, bargaining, anger.
Mhm.
So we're going to push them through those different stages. And eventually they accept, which would be when the desires of the wicked is perished, is when they've accepted what's being taught.
Mhm. That was the danger of of being a prophet in those days, and even today. And telling the truth and putting the truth out on the table is not always comfortable for everybody. And people have to deal. They have to reconcile with certain truths that they may not want. They're not ready to accept because they're in that denial phase still, maybe. So I could see how the wicked, would be angry and gnash their teeth. And is it good news for the Hebrews? And we can kind of look at this and say, well, we want everybody to be, hugged and loved and feel good about this, but the truth is that that's not what happens.
You have to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when you're talking about righteousness, there's always going to be people that are mad about it. So this is like the reminder of like, even when you're doing the right thing, people will still be mad at you and not be wanting you to do that. So it's like, there will be, you're not going to make everyone happy by being righteous.
Sure.
The other thing that after the session on Monday that we did not talk about is the whole process of protecting your boundaries, and that in the case of the wicked at this time, they would see themselves as protecting the boundaries they had known.
Mm-hmm.
But now Israel comes in and pushes those boundaries aside. So what is involved in creating new boundaries?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think some of what you're talking about, is how do you go about creating new boundaries when the old boundaries aren't working anymore? What does that look like? What do we do to establish new boundaries when the old ones the old ones are getting in the way of, in this case, it's God wanted the people of Israel settling in this land, so it meant creating new boundaries, and so it meant pushing the boundaries that were established. And how do you do that?
In the biblical context, it's really a discussion about law and gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get to that at the gospel reading. But and God and Jesus pushing the boundaries of what law was when he was here with us. Like last week's conversation about the Sabbath and what the Sabbath meant. He was pushing the boundary of that law so that he could show the community that no, it's okay that I'm going to heal somebody on the Sabbath so that she can participate in the Sabbath in a healthy and whole way. So.
And he reminded them that they took care of their livestock on Sundays,
Yeah.
so they were working too.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to. Well, Dean knows you can't go a day without feeding
That's
the
right.
animals. That's a constant 24/7 demand.
And water.
Water especially.
All right, Hebrews. Greta's favorite book of the Bible.
Hebrews?
But because it's the place in the Bible where they talk about coffee,
Oh, okay.
Hebrews.
Oh, my God.
I don't even drink coffee, so.
See I'm rubbing off on her now. She's telling dad jokes now, and that's like.
Yeah, I would expect you to come up with that, the coffee lover then.
I delight in passing on that wisdom to Greta.
Yeah, let me read it. We can get on with it. Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them, those who are being tortured as though you yourselves are being tortured. Let marriage be held in honor by all, and let the marriage bed be kept undefiled, for God will judge fornicators and adulterers. Keep your lives free from the love of money, and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can anyone do to me? Remember your leaders, those who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Through him, then, let us continually offer a sacrifice of praise to God, that is, the fruit of lips that confess his name. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God.
Thinking about the hospitality again with the idea of a table and humility around the table of like when you are offering hospitality, you're not always getting something in return, but you do it anyway to welcome whoever is there. In that, yeah, like moving away from the transactional side of welcoming people so that you will be welcomed, but welcoming them because that's what we're called to do.
And you can entertain angels without
Mhm.
knowing it. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's just, I don't think God tempts us. But when there's somebody on the street corner asking for money, or somebody coming to you asking for something, how do you know if that person is there to see how you react to them? And so, I'm afraid not to, help them.
There is a guilty conscience that happens when you drive by people in need, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking for myself. I mean, maybe I'm in a hurry and maybe I don't have anything in my vehicle to stop to give them, or how do you you take Apple Pay? I mean,
I used to have that excuse. Now I keep a bunch of $1 bills in my visor. So, somebody steals $10 or $20 out of my car, it's not going to hurt me as much as the guilty feeling I have when I drive by. And
I got burned one time. 114th and Dodge. Some guy looks like just ratty, needs all the help he can get. So I turned into the McDonald's right there, go through the drive-thru, getting meal, milk, coffee. And as I turn back out, I see him leaving the median, and I watch him go to the south and get in a brand new pickup. And I'm thinking, I'm driving a 10-year-old car, and that's got to be a year or two old.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm like, and so I think of that, but I still tend to not give money. But when I try to give substance, and And there have been people kind of like, and I don't do it for everybody that I see,
Yeah.
but I've had somebody look at me kind of, what the hell is that for? You know, well, you know, then they want the money for drugs or booze, or I can buy my own. I don't like McDonald's. I want burgers. You know.
Yeah.
But
But they aren't that much in need. But that's
You know, and
them.
it's-
I'm talking about me.
well, but I have those same guilty pangs a lot of times when I drive by, because it's like, what's their story? But for the grace of God, could that be I?
Yeah. But see, you were saved, you gotta eat in McDonald's instead of giving it to somebody who evidently didn't need it. Of course, maybe he borrowed, you know, his pastor's
why
brand
would
new
he?
truck that, so he could drive out there.
Or maybe he's just poor and can't afford anything because he spent all his money on his truck.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not stopped me, but when I deal with the guilt, I have my own charity that I give to.
Yeah.
I give my alms a certain way. And so I may not give it to you, but I do give.
Yeah.
And that's how I deal with the guilt.
I just never know who that angel standing on the corner might be, you know, which one of them is.
Yeah, but God knows what's in your heart.
Well, the
Yeah.
trouble is that we hear so many stories about all this.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, to me, when I drive by and they're at Westeros, you know, there's always people in the media where they're not supposed to be anyway.
Right.
And I keep thinking, don't look them in the eyes. Do not look them in the eyes.
Yeah. I think if I was a woman, I'd never stop.
Yeah, oh, no.
Because there are places where they can go, you know.
Well, there are. I mean,
Yeah.
there's homeless shelters. There's places that you can get meals and food, and but I've got so many things to atone for. I don't need another mark on the wrong side of the ledge. So.
The verse 15 has I think it's an interesting phrase. Sacrifice of praise. I never really thought of praise as being a sacrifice before. Through him that let us continually offer a sacrifice of praise. My Bible says the sacrifices of praise are a specific form of offering, but the term is also used as a metaphor for prayer. You know, and
Say that again, please.
it says sacrifices of praise were a specific form of offering, but the term is also used as a metaphor for prayer. And it goes on to talk. It gives some scriptural references. Even Romans, for right living as sacrifice. I mean, when we think of sacrifice, we think of like. I mean, I think like we have to give something up, and it's going to hurt us somehow.
Right.
You know. But maybe that's not really what sacrifice, biblical sacrifice, is about. I don't know.
I don't know if this, but every time I read this text, I think it was the last letter I ever received from my grandmother. It was my junior year in seminary. And she starts out the letter by saying, Glenn, you'll be happy to know that I made peace with the squirrels. Because my grandmother was not rich in many ways, but one thing she had, and one thing she protected mightily, were the 7 black walnut trees that were on her small lot. And when we were younger, and my younger brothers got more involved in this than I did, she would have them come up and run through the trees and knock all the walnuts out of the trees so she could pick them up. And because that was how Grandma passed the winter, was one of the ways she passed the winter was shelling black walnuts. That is, I still wonder how much, but she shelled a lot of them, and her hands would be black, brown with it. And anyway, So in this letter, she says, yeah, I was upset because I didn't think I was gonna get any walnuts, but then she said, I saw the squirrels running through the trees, and they were doing the same things you did. They would knock all the walnuts down on the ground, so that they could go down, pick them up, and go bury them. And so Grandma would be out there with her brown sack, picking up all the walnuts that she could, as they were running through the trees. And she said, and you'd be happy to know, Glenn, that I left plenty for them. You know, and I think when that, you know, for her that was a sacrifice. It was a whole change in her thinking that every walnut was hers. And that no, they had a right to them, and she was willing to sacrifice that.
And the squirrels were grateful.
Yeah.
Well, but
I'm
it
sure
was
that-
her definition of how much they needed, not their definition of how much they needed.
Well,
They do bury them and make an awful mess though.
and and you know, and that's how walnut trees get spread too,
Yeah.
because they plant it, or they bury them and don't remember where they planted them either.
Like I found buried peanuts, cold peanuts in the shell when I was planting flowers that the squirrels
Well,
buried
and-
in the spring.
And I think that's, you know, so we don't know what the people standing on the corner, what they have gone through, what they are dealing with. And if I can help, I will, you know, but we don't, that's the thing that I think of when I think of that letter, that somehow my grandmother understood something that she had never, at 91 years old, she learned something new about, you know, her relationship with the squirrels. They weren't enemies.
It was a gift.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where it becomes a sense of prayer and praise. You know, where before she was cursing the squirrels, now she could praise them for helping her.
Yeah. Well, and grace is such a freely given gift that sometimes feels unfair. Like we don't deserve it. Some of us may deserve it more than others or something, because that's how we like to think about things, but it's a freely given gift for everyone. So we're not, yeah. What does it mean to freely give something with no expectations and no judgment of who's receiving the gift and why they're giving it and what they're going to do with it? It's hard. We're not good at that.
That's why God gives it and he doesn't let me be in charge.
You know, Gene, back to your example though, you know, giving that gift to that person and then feeling like, wow, he didn't need it. Maybe that planted a seed in his own heart to stop that behavior. I mean, maybe you.
Well, he never saw me.
Oh, he never saw you.
Never saw me because
Oh,
he was
okay.
walking away, and I
Oh, I see.
parked-
You never actually.
I parked my car and I was going to walk out to the median. He turned around and he was walking away.
Oh, okay.
He never saw me. But I see what you're saying.
You see it, yeah. That maybe, you know, in those moments where we feel like we've been had, well, maybe that we're planting a seed that their heart can be changed, or their heart will be changed somehow by acknowledging.
Joy and I
I
did
think
that.
some of
Joy and I did
people
that
just
this week though.
think of it as a
Very
job.
toughly. She took I don't know how he found the ranch. When I say the ranch, does everybody know my girlfriend's place?
Yeah.
And he was just riding his bicycle from the Open Door Mission. And this was July. And I mean, he was riding in 100-degree weather. And he'd get to the ranch and he'd just volunteer. And she had him building some stuff. And eventually she said, hey, you want to move into she's got an open trailer that she uses as an Airbnb. She says, I'll just take that off. And you can live in that trailer and I'll hire you. And then she let him go Monday. And he's been working there less than a month. because he was living at the Open Door Mission, and they have no wet policy. You can't be on drugs or alcohol. So they were breathalyzing him. And all of a sudden now he was living in a trailer with money, and she hadn't been in the trailer. Just booze everywhere. And he was an alcoholic. And she can't have that. Drugs and alcohol, like that aren't by what she does. And so she had to let him go.
Yeah.
But she called me and said, Dean, can ya? And I said, no, I've already talked to him, and I know she wanted me to try to hook him up use my connections with the VA to try to help him find some lodging. And I'm like, no, I can't get him into New Visions because he was only a reservist.
Huh.
The VA can help you as a vet, but a vet is somebody who served, but by VA standards, that's somebody on active duty who served 2 years active duty, or you got called to active duty and served your period, then the VA. And I'm like, no, I can't. And New Visions can't take him in a veteran's homeless shelter. They can't take him in because he isn't a vet.
Qualified.
He was a Marine reservist who didn't even complete one tour of enlistment. So he doesn't qualify. And I said, well, I've got a bunch of clothes that she'd given to her. And I said, I'll take those clothes down to New Visions, and I'll talk to Steve, the guy that runs it. And I said, see if we can find something. And I hadn't thought of it until we were talking about it just now. And I went in, hey Steve, how you doing? Hey, great, bunch of clothes, oh, hey, okay. And we started talking. Well, how are things going with you? And he started talking about a new program he'd gotten a grant for, to where he could help female veterans and veterans like James. And he says, have him come in tomorrow and fill out an application, maybe we can get him in.
Cool.
You just don't know. If I hadn't said, well, I'll go try anyway, even though I know, and, but he's got to go in and fill out the application, but hopefully then that gets him dry, and he'll be able to get counseling for his addiction, otherwise he's right back where he was. But
Yeah.
it's amazing, I guess, how the Lord works, and those that need help. Because the guy that he had to go fill out the application, Joy even knew him. So hopefully, we can maybe open the door and he's got to accept it. Like the guy walking across the street, you were saying, Pastor, is it going to plant the seed of, oh, I had that great thing going and now maybe I need to accept my dependency.
And blessings come in all shapes and sizes. Yeah, it's a great story. You were going to say something wrong. You know what I mean?
I'm long-winded, I got stupid long stories.
No, that's okay.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
We've got one more passage left.
I'll be glad to read. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests choose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous.
This story skips over the fourth time Jesus heals on the Sabbath. We just heard the third one last week. And they decided not to include that in this, but there was a man with dropsy who was healed by the That's kind of how I feel about the Huskers this year.
You're not on
I
full
mean,
time.
they've already been humbled. There's no direction for them to go but up, right?
Favored by almost 14, so hopefully do something.
They can't get worse.
Don't ever.
Well, okay.
Yeah, maybe God had to humble the whole state.
Probably.
11 o'clock on Saturday, which channel?
11:30, is it? On-
11:30.
Oh, it's on Fox Sports.
Is it 11?
Okay.
11:30.
On Fox.
Or is it 11:30?
Well, obviously Luke had read Proverbs.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom in this.
Well, I'm kind of struggling with this, that he says that you can't invite, you shouldn't invite, you're the rich, all those people, you should invite. So that means you would have to have 2 banquets.
Mm. One for the rich and one for the poor.
Yeah.
Maybe if you invite some of your poorer friends or whatever to your banquet, then maybe your other friends you invited might get the same idea that you did.
Well, I think it's specifically talking about inviting all these people that could invite you in return so that you'd be repaid, right? Even like, when this was always, you probably did, like somebody gives you a plate of cookies or something, and so when you give the plate back, it can't be empty. You have to put new things back on the plate to give to that person, right?
Yeah.
Just like, you have to return the favor. So, yeah, I think he's saying specifically, don't expect the favor to be returned. Or don't do something because you're expecting something in return.
Yeah, that is, Cindy and I have had discussion about this, somebody gives you a plate of cookies, or sends you some food. So, you feel, I gotta give it back. Well, when you give it back, something back to them, you're not allowing them to have done something for you. So, to me, just give them the empty plate back, say thank you very much, and then sometime in the future, do something for them. Allow people to be nice to you. Accept their gift. And,
But on the other hand, I have a friend that fixes me dinner now and then, because she loves to cook, and she also has to have extra, so she calls me.
yeah.
So I have a basket in the kitchen always with dishes that belongs to her. And so I decided that I buy Swedish candy, and I throw Swedish candy in the bowls and whatever, and when I give it back.
Yeah.
And then I keep thinking, that's a gift from me to her, and so
Yeah.
It's something different.
it's something, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, right relationship looks different for everybody and every friend
Yeah.
giving gifts, but if we're thinking about giving to the poor, not having expectations in return of, oh, well, now, like when the church does something, like sponsor a refugee family, you know, we're not expecting them to convert to Christianity and come to our church. That defeats the purpose of what we're doing to help them, right? So that sort of expectation of getting something in return.
I think maybe the getting something in return part is just a relationship and not
Yeah.
necessarily something material.
Yeah.
You know,
I
maybe-
think we also miss the point if we, that this idea of inviting someone else because you'll get invited in return is all about.
That's Western
It's
values.
transactional, it's
Yeah.
a transactional relationship.
Yeah.
It's all based on this transaction. You give me, I give you. You buy so much from me, I buy so much from you. But, you know, and it, like you say, it's very much capitalist economy. It's very much Western economy. It's how our country operates. And in a lot of ways, the way our world operates. But the transformation, we never know when that's going to happen. We never know when somebody will truly be, their lives will be transformed. Another story, my dad was the veteran service officer in Antelope County for 10, 15 years. And he had, there's one of the veterans in Neely that was constantly getting himself in trouble. And Dad would take him up to Sturgis, South Dakota, which was the closest treatment center. And he said he can't even remember how many times he took John, or Leo is his name. John is his son's name. Leon was his name. How many times he took him? He said, and sometimes he would even beat me back home. Yeah, but something happened at one of those times, and John ended up starting the first AA meeting in Neely.
The son?
Leon.
Yeah, okay.
Leon, and John became an Eagle Scout. So it transformed his transformation, Leon's transformation.
Led to something good in the community.
Yes, and in his family. You know, John became an Eagle Scout. He became and eventually became a Scout leader and helped others become Eagles. And
Kind of paid it forward, in other words.
yeah, but it was a transformation that happened for Leon, and that impacted his whole family.
You don't
Yeah,
know when something's going to take.
Right.
Or when it's
And-
gonna finally have resonance.
Mhm.
And I think this is, when I read this, that's what this is about. We don't know. If we're dealing out of a transformational mindset, we're willing to do something for someone else, not knowing what it's in God's hands.
Well, there's a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah.
Instead of being tied down to the expectation and being disappointed when it's not reciprocated, it gives us the freedom to let go of whatever needs to happen, let God let that thing happen, and be satisfied with that.
Yeah, when you pass God's love on to other people, you don't know what they're going to do with it. You don't know if they're going to accept it. Just say, oh, good, thanks, or
Gnash
accept
their
it back. Yeah. But God still wants you to do it. And, it's just like if you give somebody money on the street, they go buy booze with it, okay, but maybe they need it for food, maybe,
That's how I feel about the Boys and Girls Club here on West Side, because, we help them, we give to them, we provide meals at Thanksgiving, we just gave them school supplies, we've done a number of things. It's not that we have the Boys and Girls Club here in worship, but, it's really nice of Ashley and her son to come Sunday, but to say thank you and give us an update, but for us to give like that and then to just let go, knowing that's making a difference in the community, and that's good enough for us to know. And you know, the Morning Star is part of our community. And we never know when that's gonna, you know, it might plant a seed with that organization or that group, and they, you know, you do by goodwill, but maybe it'll make a difference in a kid's life, and they'll think about the church in a way that they'll want to go to worship and have God in their life. So, I don't know, I think that's how I think the benefit of outreach as a congregation is to give to the community in a way that we let go of, like Glenn likes to say, you know, make the effort, release the outcome.
Okay, thank you for that. You're making me think of things, because when I went to New Visions, the homeless veterans place, I'm walking out to my Jeep, and a guy comes walking up to me that's living there. Actually, it's not, anyway. And he goes, "Thanks." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're welcome." He goes, "No, I like it when you come here." And I'm like, "Okay." But my VFW, we buy barbecue once or twice a year, and we go in and we serve them barbecue. You know, I don't recognize you,
But he recognized
but
you.
you're and I'm nobody.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just there to look everybody and say, "Hey, you know, what branch of the service were you in? What you know," and to engage you in a brief conversation, and serve you a meal,
Right.
and walk away, because it's not about me. It's about honoring you. And you know, I think it was 4 months ago that I was there last, and this guy comes up to me and remembers me, and I'm like, "Why? It's not me." But that's all he wanted to talk about was me, and I felt not ashamed, but I'm like,
Well, but it is humbling.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is a definition of humility.
Yeah.
I mean, is when you can accept things from someone whom society would judge as lower than you, but you recognize it as a true gift.
"No, he was an equal. You're a veteran.
Yeah,
I'm a,
right.
you know, we're
And
of
he
the
was
same
giving you a
equal."
gift, yeah, and he was giving you a gift of his appreciation of his things.
Mhm.
You know, and that, you know, that we can just humbly thank, you know, be grateful for that and accept that in all humility, and say, you know, buddy, you did more than you realized. I think that's the part that when I say, I mean, to me, make the effort, release the outcome is just another way of saying let go, let God. But for a lot of people, it makes more sense, you know, in the sense of, you know, that we aren't in control of the outcome. We aren't in control of the outcome. But how much energy and effort do we put forth every day in trying to control the outcome? Instead of just seriously, you just made an effort to treat vets because you have a deep compassion for vets, and you were willing to be down there and treat them as equals. And this guy saw that, and he was grateful. He was just very grateful that there's someone in his life who would treat him as equal. That, yeah, that's a great story. I mean, and to me, really speaks directly to what this is about.
That's in Council Bluffs, isn't it?
No. Yes and no. It started off as Mom's place in Council Bluffs, and he's been feeding people there for 20 years. Pastor Waller. And then, I'm not bragging, but I found a VA grant to build for homeless veterans. And so Congressman Terry and I were trying to figure we need somebody to apply for the grant. And somebody we knew Pastor Waller. And that person had just helped Pastor Waller build his new place in Council Bluffs. And so the two of them as a team put in the grant with the VA, and built New Visions in Omaha, which was then a homeless veterans transitional housing. And they've now changed the name in Council Bluffs to New Visions for both places, but the Omaha is specifically for veterans. So, yeah, I know everybody
Where's
there.
that located?
Right next to the Francis Sienna.
Oh.
Yeah, it was 18th and Hamilton or something like that. But so, yeah, when I walk in there, not everybody knows me, but the leader does because he knows I help bring it there. But it's was interesting because if you've not been down that way, I mean, they now have a block around everywhere is a tent city. You know, you hear about LA and tent cities, and I've not seen it in Omaha, and it's crazy around. And I asked Steve about that. He goes, "Oh yeah, it's getting worse and worse."
Oh, really?
Yeah, because people are afraid to go into the shelters because of COVID, and that got them into camping on the streets. And New Visions has got a fence around their property, but I mean, right outside the fence, there's people in makeshift tents.
Wow.
Sleeping.
Really?
So it goes back to that seeing the person and needing money, but you know, in that case, if you were to walk up and have the 20 in ones, you wouldn't have had enough ones to hand everybody a one. You know, but anyway, I don't know where I was going with that.
I think you guys, with all the stories you have, could be my preacher on Sunday here. Just get up and tell story after story and share.
Well, I think, you know, that's part of transformational ministry too, is the willingness to listen to their stories. You know, I don't know how many sets of, when you go down, you know, we'll tell you their story, but, and that was one of my dad's gifts, was, you know, he could sit down, well, he could sit down with anyone, but especially a veteran, and they would be telling you their life story in 10 minutes, so.
One final thought is that I had is, you know, we can look at the community and all the needs, and you know, we were up in Minneapolis with the youth, and there's needs up in that community, and it can become overwhelming, and it's like, well, how can I do all of these things? And I think that's where the power of the church comes in, because we all have you know, little niches in our lives where we can make those differences, and I think that's a cool thing to take with us, is to knowing that we're, as a community, we can even do much more than we could just as an individual, and hope that overwhelming need is, you know, we can whittle away at it a little bit as a community. So.
I've always looked at it, I can't help everybody, but if I can help one, I never know the outcome of that.
Yeah.
So Morning Star gives to Boys and Girls Club at Westside, and there's somebody who got a benefit, and that person goes on to cure cancer.
Yeah.
You never know.
The-
You never know how you reached out and the impact you had on that one life, like James. You know, Joy had to make that hard decision. I'm sorry you can't stay, but maybe that'll turn his life around, and who knows what greatness he'll go on and what gifts he'll give to others. You never can know the true impact.
Yeah, being on the planning committee over there, every time I go over there, they share impact stories of youth that graduated and went on to college and grad school, and in some cases became, you know, they got PhDs, doctorates, and are doing those kinds of things. And because they had a place to go after school and do some, you know, extra playing and training and mentoring, they were able to stay away from some other negative influences, and it's super cool. So anyway. Dean, thanks for joining us.
I've been putting it on my calendar and attending every chance I get.
Good.
I haven't been here recently because Pastor knows I've had some medical issues, and if you got a second, I'll update you.
Cool.
So this time, last Wednesday, I was being recovered.
Okay.
So,
Glad you're here.
I'll be here when I can. I enjoy it.
We enjoy you.
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Is anybody joining us online?
2 viewers.
They might look at it later too, you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you.